I just want to welcome everybody to this workshop, Healing Your Relationship with Your Body Through Mindfulness with Shannon Myers. Um, I want to introduce Shannon to you first. And so Shannon is a licensed marriage family therapist who's been working with women and families for the past 2 decades. She brings an integrated mindfulness approach to her private psychotherapy practice up in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. She provides support for depression, anxiety, trauma, disordered eating, grief, and loss. Shannon honors her own stillborn daughter by living more fully in the present and supporting other bereaved parents. She founded the North Bay chapter of HAND, which is helping after neonatal death, up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she facilitates their free peer support groups for bereaved parents. She's honored to support bereaved parents who are grieving the loss of their babies, as well as those who are subsequently pregnant. She's the co-founder of Marin Perinatal Therapy and is committed to serving perinatal women and connecting perinatal providers in the community. Shannon's the mother of 3 children, 2 in her arms and 1 in her heart. So I'd like to just welcome Shannon and thank her for being here and offering her time and expertise and leading us through this workshop. I was saying to Shannon before that Return to Zero Hope has such a solid foundation in mindfulness. You know, we use this as part of our retreats, as part of our support groups, knowing that is a powerful tool in the healing journey. And so we're excited to have her here today. And I didn't introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I am Kylie Hanisch, and I am the founder of Return to Zero Hope. My son Norbert was stillborn, and that was in 2005. And we began doing retreats for bereaved moms, and it led to the organization becoming a nonprofit. And so we are committed not only to supporting bereaved families, but also helping to educate and empower healthcare providers who can then better care for grieving families. Today's session will be recorded so that the people who are not able to watch live can watch at a later time. Your faces are not on here, but I just wanted to let you know that. And then if you can also use the chat box for any communication, whether that's communication to us just for some reason, and mostly for questions. And Shannon will leave time for questions and answers throughout the workshop. And there will be some mindfulness, participating portion of the workshop as well. So with all of that, I'm going to hand it off to Shannon and let her take it from here. But just thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, Kylie. Just wanting to make sure you can hear me. Yes? Okay, good. So, oh goodness, it's morning time still. Excuse me. I just wanted to say to all of you who are here how honored I am to be part of this opportunity to gather. Even though it's on video, it's not the same as being together, in honor of Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. And I know Return to Zero is doing Hopetober, which I think is just an amazing way to recognize this topic of pregnancy and infant loss that is not spoken about enough in our culture and around the world. And certainly was my experience as a bereaved parent early in my loss. I feel like there's a little bit more awareness now. And I guess the first part is that I just want to say how sorry I am for each of your losses. We are all in a club we didn't want to be part of. And at the same time, I have found this community that I have connected with during this time of loss and healing to be one of the most rich experiences of my life. So I'm just very grateful that all of you are here. I want to encourage each of you to take care of yourselves throughout this next hour and a half. Excuse me. If you need to step away, if you need to do whatever that would be helpful to take care of yourselves if you're feeling triggered, I would just definitely encourage, as we're practicing mindfulness, to breathe and ground and take care of yourself in whatever way that is. This will be recorded so you can always come back and do the next piece. And I also think it takes a tremendous amount of courage just to be here. So thank you for taking your Saturday morning to be here with me. If you need support, feel free to use the chat. And afterwards, you're also welcome to reach out to me or Return to Zero Hope for any resources. So we will start there. Actually, I should have started this already. Okay, so we will be talking about mindfulness and just one second. Okay, talking about mindfulness, and I will be sharing my story, and then at the end we will be doing a guided meditation, and hopefully my voice will be woken up by that time. In terms of my story, my loss happened in 2007. I was 23 and a half weeks pregnant with my daughter Scarlett. And I found out at my 20-week ultrasound that my cervix was short, and they were concerned, the doctors were concerned at that scan. So I was supposed to go back for a follow-up appointment in 2 weeks. And I went on a trip to visit 2 of my best friends who were also pregnant at that time. And I remember coming home and not feeling myself. I felt like something was off. I felt pressure. I felt concerned, but I was also in a lot of denial. The flight to get home was delayed. It was this whole big process. And I remember calling my doctor's office and kind of being dismissed in terms of coming in to be checked before my follow-up appointment, which was like 2 days later. And it was my doula who really pushed for me to advocate to go in, and the experience of seeing the ultrasound, because my water had leaked slowly. Sorry, I'm going back. So basically when I went in, my cervix had shortened, and they sent me in for triage and an emergency cerclage procedure. That happened first. I was at that follow-up appointment alone. And that was really challenging in terms of, I don't know, I think that denial helped me feel like everything was going to be okay. And so it was traumatic. It was a traumatic experience to realize that that we were in need of a medical procedure, a surgery, and it was risky for the next 2 weeks if I would be able to carry the pregnancy. And at about that 2-week point, I went on bed rest and everything. My water started leaking, and then that's when I called the doctor for a follow-up and felt dismissed, and finally went in with my husband, and there was no amniotic fluid on the ultrasound, and that was just a memory that will stay with me forever, a traumatic memory. Everything just really felt really dark, and I didn't see any way to any kind of future that was hopeful or beautiful. I just felt intense grief. I felt like my body had failed me. Felt so guilty. The diagnosis at that time was called an insufficient or incompetent cervix. So it was just even a term that is demoralizing, in my opinion. I did feel like when we went to the hospital to deliver my daughter, the team that I had was really supportive in terms of helping us know what to expect with our delivery. The OBGYN on call was amazing. I felt really lucky to be able to deliver Scarlett naturally and to be able to hold her and meet her and spend that brief time with her. It was precious and beautiful and heartbreaking all at the same time. No one else besides my partner, my husband, met her, so that felt like a little bit disconnected from the rest of our family. I felt like all of the control, the perceived control I had about the world was gone. I could not make sense of why this had happened. And I just really spent time like going over and over and over again, every detail, that flight, being away, what if that, what if I hadn't gone and things have been different? It was really difficult to be in my body. I felt really, really like my body had failed me. And I definitely needed time to grieve and felt like I was able to take that time, which was good. It did feel isolating. And I did lean towards relationships that felt more authentic. And I was surprised that some people were able to step up and really show up for me. And then there were definitely people who couldn't, and that was really challenging. And because I guess one silver lining was that we knew what had happened, we were able to be more proactive, and I am blessed to have 2 healthy living children. So that has been a blessing. However, they don't replace Scarlett. They are my second and third. She's always going to be my first. So what was helpful? I think having the space to grieve and feel my feelings, those waves of grief, those moments where I was just on the floor crying my eyes out, was helpful, even though it was really difficult to be there. And I didn't know how long those experiences would last. I have less of them now. But even still, I would say Scarlett's birthday is always a challenging day. It kind of all gets gathered on her special day. I wrote a letter to her after being released from the hospital and coming home and I was in shock, but wanted to remember her story and my story of her pregnancy and how that felt, that experience, the good and the challenging. And I read that letter every year on her birthday, and it kind of brings me back. I also had a playlist of music that I still listen to that also brings me back to that time, because it's been 13 years now, and so some of those memories have faded with time. I did attend a group, as Kylie had mentioned, I'm part of HAND, which is Helping After Neonatal Death. At that time, the group was called SAND, Support After Neonatal Death. And just to know that other people were struggling and also healing from their losses was helpful for me. I was in grief therapy, or I joined grief therapy at that time. I feel like having the opportunity to communicate with my husband around how our grief felt different from each other, but also having that shared experience was really important. The piece around feeling disconnected with my body was most supported by yoga, I would say. I spent a lot of time crying on the mat, but felt like that was a way to be in my body and begin to heal. And then I was always yearning for ritual. I think it's so amazing that RTZ Hope offers these retreats. And at that time, I didn't know of any that existed. And so bringing in ritual, we planted a rose bush for Scarlet, and it's on its 4th bloom this year, which is beautiful. And participated in hand. They have a service of remembrance, so that ritual of being with other parents, like a memorial service, has been supportive for me. Also, being in nature is another way that I was able to get a little perspective. I felt like my world was very small and I couldn't see past where I was in pain. And so nature has been a place where I've been able to feel a little bit more peace. And then definitely distraction. We watched a lot of TV, a lot of binge watching, and humor where I could find it. And that wasn't always so easy to find in the beginning of my grief. Kylie already mentioned a little bit about my work. As she said, I'm a private psychotherapist. So I was doing that work before I lost Scarlet. And I would say that was the place where I felt like there was the most authenticity in my life. I was obviously not getting support from my clients, but they knew what had happened. But it felt like a place where I could be real. I feel like in some way having an opportunity to support other parents along this journey has been a gift that Scarlet has given me. I also focus on maternal mental health, as Kylie had mentioned, around pregnancy planning, pregnancy loss, and I work a lot with subsequent pregnancies, which is just a really hard road. So a lot of support, I think, is needed from the whole team. My previous kind of training was around eating disorder work. So body image issues and disordered eating is another area where I work with adults and teens. And just missed collaboration in private practice. So creating Marin perinatal therapy was one way to feel like a multidisciplinary group of providers was communicating and providing resources for the clients that I see here in Marin. And then my work with HAND. So HAND has chapters right now in San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Cruz. And then I think in 2017, 2016, we opened the Marin chapter. I knew that I wanted to be part of something that was more local, that was a local resource. So we serve Sonoma and right now the East Bay, Sonoma, Napa, and the East Bay, as well as Marin. And I feel like being a volunteer for HAND has been an opportunity to honor Scarlet's life and just support other people as they navigate this really difficult path and help people feel less alone. And in addition to that, Pomegranate is a local yoga studio that I've partnered with, started a few years ago around the International Wave of Light, which is on October 15th. And we light candles at 7 p.m. all around the world and do yoga and a little bit of guided meditation. And in addition to doing those each year for couples, I've also recently offered some half-day retreats for moms, because I just feel like sharing our story has been so important. And sometimes that's most of what we get to. So in terms of mindfulness, my parents were hippies. They followed the transcendental meditation movement after the Beatles. And so I started to learn to meditate at like 5 years old. And that was definitely a part of just what my family did. I don't meditate regularly now, but I do bring in mindfulness in my hikes, in my yoga, and I learned about guided meditation work through the support groups I led for eating disorders. I trained with a hypnotherapist. So a lot of the mindfulness training I have is kind of life experience, and just being in nature, which is a really healing place for me. Okay, so moving on to, I had mentioned just our culture feels here in America like there isn't a lot of space for grieving. I feel like people are given a very short period of time to grieve a loss, and it's really uncomfortable for others to witness our pain. So they want to fix it. They want to say things they think will make us feel better. And really that usually makes us feel more isolated. There are other cultures. I know this slide relates to the Japanese Buddhist ritual of Mizuku. And these are little Jizo statues that represent miscarriages and pregnancy losses. And I just love the idea of gathering and having kind of a way to honor those losses. I think a lot of what is challenging about the way we handle grief is that it's different for everyone. And I think that even though if this is your first experience with grief, you know what you need on some level, even though it might feel really challenging and intense, that process of healing is unique to you, and it can take quite a long time. So where I feel people get stuck is thinking that they're not doing it right, or that they're not, like they're fearful that in some way they're not grieving in the way that they should. And that is, I would say, the biggest thing that I share with clients and in group is your grieving process is your own unique experience. If you have a partner who's grieving differently, that's really normal. We often want to avoid suffering, and there's just no way around grief. So it is definitely not necessary to be in it all of the time. I think naturally, as we go through those early stages where we're in it all of the time, there are periods of time where we might feel like, oh, I didn't think about it for that second or that minute, and then it can kind of come back. And I would say my experience with having my loss be, definitely many years ago, is it kind of waits, and it still feels really intense when I do think about Scarlett and I do talk about her. It's because she was so important to me. And really it was a loss of hope at that time. And I know that, there's more information in the media where celebrities are talking about their losses. It's hurtful to me to see, especially with Chrissy Teigen and John Legend, how horrible people can be. So like if there is a public mention of a miscarriage or a loss, how hard it is for people to accept or be supportive and compassionate, and how important it is. We all need that. So I'm going to move on to talking about emotions, but I love this quote. Grief, I've learned, is really just love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All of that unspent love gathers in the corners of your eyes, the lump in your throat, and in the hollow part of your chest. Grief is just love with no place to go, by Jamie Anderson. I'm just going to stop there in case there are any questions or any comments before we move into talking about emotions. Okay. Feel free to jump in if that's different. So in terms of emotions, I'm also just checking our time. These are just a few. There's so many emotions connected to grief, but I just want to give space and permission to recognize that when we experience a loss, there's usually a tremendous amount of anxiety. We're in a fight, flight, freeze, adrenaline charged state. And even right now during COVID, there's like all these other layers. So I'm certainly finding with people who have experienced a loss during this time of the pandemic, it's just even more kind of overwhelming. Our stress hormones rise. It's just a really important time, I have found, to be mindful, to breathe, to be in the present moment. And sometimes anxiety doesn't even have kind of a trigger, so it can just show up. In terms of self-blame, I feel like that was a really challenging place where I got stuck in the judgment, the wanting control, the trying to make sense of what had happened around my loss. And what I came to is that I don't think Scarlett wanted me to suffer in this way, and I wasn't able to change the outcome. So I eventually had to let it go. And then in terms of guilt, I feel like for me, there was a belief that I had done something wrong. And I know now that if I could have done anything different to change the outcome, I would have. But I've just felt this tremendous weight of responsibility that, you know, Scarlett might have been able to survive if my body hadn't failed me. And eventually I just had to find a different way to be with that storyline, that narrative, because it wasn't helping me in this experience of healing. And then the difference between guilt and shame, if you're interested in this information, Brene Brown does a lot of great work around talking about shame and guilt. But shame is definitely more global in terms of I am bad versus I did something bad. It's incredibly isolating and so very painful. It is a really motivating emotion that can really isolate us. In terms of confusion, it just was, I didn't have a lot of people in my life who had experienced a loss like this. And so it just didn't make sense. The whole natural order of life was completely turned upside down for me. And I really had a hard time getting my bearings. I had mentioned around trauma that ultrasound picture after we had lost the amniotic fluid and before my cerclage surgery was this kind of moment of trauma for me. Trauma is different for everyone. Most of us experience trauma at some point in our lives, but especially around a loss, it is so much about how we perceive this situation or this event more than how, you know, maybe somebody on the outside would. So the trauma can bring us right back into that memory, that experience. We can be re-experiencing it. I know there's another RTZ event this month that will be focusing more on trauma, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But it can lead to an experience of PTSD. It doesn't always. And I will be talking about resilience, and that sometimes can be the difference between spending a lot of time in the trauma in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And then anger. Anger, I was angry at myself. I was angry that, the OB that was my OB, who wasn't there, was on vacation, didn't call, didn't follow up. I felt like my spiritual connection was challenged. I know a lot of people are angry at God. This does not make sense. This is, it just is, it's so painful and can be really, really challenging to know where to put that anger and what to do with it. But to express it would be, definitely something that I encourage. Any questions before we move on? I'm going to talk about mindfulness next. Okay. So a definition of mindfulness is moment-to-moment awareness of one's experience without judgment. And we have a lot of thoughts that go through our minds every day, tens of thousands, 50 to 80,000 thoughts each day. A lot of those can be critical or judgmental thoughts. And I find that mindfulness is about kind of slowing things down, taking a breath, being in the moment, and detaching from the thoughts. And that was a really helpful part of my healing. In Buddhism, the concept of impermanence is about letting go of control and judgment, allowing things to be as they are. So I was able to turn to that, especially with my yoga practice around, okay, what's happening right now? What can I do? What can I focus on that's in this moment versus everything that feels so awful, that is out of my control. I was able to be more compassionate when I was able to be more mindful. So that was helpful. And it can certainly change our cognitions, the way we're thinking. I certainly see the preciousness of life in a way that I had never seen before. And I do try to live in the moment. I do try to focus on the things that are important to me, instead of, I used to be somebody who, said yes to everything, was always running around busy. That is no longer the way that I operate in the world. And that is part of Scarlett's gift, is just to be here. So as I had mentioned, meditation is just one way to practice mindfulness. Yoga for me is another. There's all kinds of different practices like Qigong and Tai Chi. And I have clients who say, oh, I don't like doing mindfulness, but I like to cook and I'm really present in the kitchen, or doing my art or things like that. So it can take many different forms. In terms of meditation, it definitely takes practice, and we'll be doing a guided meditation, so you'll get to notice what happens for you. It's really about noticing the thoughts and then gently bringing back to some anchor, some focus, which is usually the breath, and not being judgmental or critical about where the thoughts go, because as I had mentioned, we have so many of them all the time. That's what the brain does. So some of the benefits of meditation and mindfulness: stress reduction, as I had mentioned, the rumination, the thoughts of kind of what I had not been able to make sense of. If you can be in the moment, it can reduce that experience. We can be less reactive emotionally if we're able to be in the present moment. And definitely I have found the increased compassion and sometimes improved insight into a situation if I'm not reacting immediately and I take a step back and take a breath and maybe even sleep on it. I definitely find that to be helpful. So in terms of mindfulness with grief, it's not intended to diminish the pain around our losses, but to acknowledge the pain and to face it head on instead of avoiding it. And I have found that it takes more energy to kind of push the grief away because it just comes back, and usually can take us by surprise and sometimes show up in a way that we're not prepared. Definitely had moments in public where I didn't want to be crying, and I was. So to have that time where I could check in with how am I doing, what am I needing, letting the tears flow, it has been helpful to me. The other thing in terms of this compassion, I just find like the community that RTZ has created that is global, which is amazing. My community in hand, and the compassion that we can feel for somebody else who has a similar story or even a different story of loss helps us feel compassion for ourselves. Sometimes we are really caught up in judgment as a protection, but really I don't feel like the judgment serves any real way of helping us with our healing. So sometimes it's helpful to think of somebody else that you love and how you would talk to them, and begin to try to at least be neutral with yourself or even speak in that gentle, compassionate way. And this helps with reducing guilt and shame and can help us also not be so isolated. I think when we're grieving, that isolation can really help us feel more alone. And so in terms of mindfulness and just what's happening in the brain, it increases connections in the brain that help us be less reactive to stressors, to recover better from stress when we experience it. And it helps our mind and our body bounce back from stress and stressful situations. So they'll do brain scans and show after meditation, it's like the opposite of that fight, flight, freeze, adrenaline response that I had mentioned around anxiety. And sometimes it takes, a lot of practice before you can get to that place. But I do think that finding whatever way we can be present in the moment in most things that we're doing and bring it back to that awareness is beneficial. So some of the examples, I'll pause in case there's any questions. Okay. Some of the examples of mindfulness and how they show up, kind of one of the most researched is the work from Jon Kabat-Zinn around mindful-based stress reduction, which is much more structured in terms of group trainings and daily meditations and sometimes retreats. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is another area that you might hear about. Mindfulness, it's definitely part of, the research that's out there that's studying how we can change these pathways in our brain, how we can slow down the thought and behavior and feeling and have a pause in between and decide how we want to react in a situation. And then the body scan, we'll be doing a little bit of that today, is a way to bring our awareness from our thoughts into our body more. And it can help kind of let go of the negative thoughts and the thoughts about the past and the future and be in the present moment. And then I had mentioned around compassion. So the loving kindness meditation is a compassion focused meditation. Usually, may I be happy, or may somebody else be happy? So a way of, there's lots of different ways of doing loving kindness meditation, but a way of using affirmation to change that way of thinking that is on the kind of theme of more judgment, and bring it back to compassion. And sometimes it takes quite a bit of practice to do that. Let's see. And then the observing our thought meditation really helps with changing the attention. It helps us practice, that experience of our mind wandering, and sometimes can help with even problem solving, just to be able to be more in the moment as we need to be. Okay. So in terms of how often, how much, what to do with meditation or mindfulness, there isn't any one way to do it. So I would just as grief is unique to you, I would explore what feels right. I know there are some people who really struggle with, oh, I don't have time to do a regular practice. It doesn't have to look like that, but really to do something that works for you, something that you can fit into your life. There are tons of apps out there. There are even apps around pregnancy loss. Specifically, I believe the app is called Expectful, which also includes pregnancy and postpartum. So I think they have very specific apps for pregnancy loss, or meditations for pregnancy loss. Yeah, Expectful is the name of that. So even a 5 or 10 minute meditation or mindfulness practice of, I know sometimes I'll see an ad from one of the Calm app on TV of just like 15 seconds of breathing and not doing anything else can be a beginning of the practice. All right, so the last topic we're going to talk about is something that I got really excited about when I learned how to kind of explain how we cope with this unimaginable loss and find something that brings us joy, beauty, appreciation for the experience. So for me, and I know in the movie Return to Zero, the comment around the way that I connect with my baby is through the pain. That is part of our experience, that I can't think of Scarlett and not be connected to my pain around her. And yet I can appreciate, now that I've been through some of the healing, and I will in my whole life be healing from this loss, there is a resilience, there is a capacity to hold this intense pain in an appreciation, because I wouldn't want to undo that experience. I wouldn't want to have not have had that experience because it was so meaningful to me. So the idea that there's a lot of research around post-traumatic growth, and I'll just read to you a little bit about what the research is finding. So some of this research began with prisoners of war who responded that they had positive changes in captivity, and that's a little bit hard to imagine. And then the research is kind of expanding to look at grief and loss and all kinds of hardships. And when we can kind of embrace what there is to learn, what there is to understand about this experience, we can experience increased inner strength. We can have an openness to new possibilities in life. You know, as I had mentioned, I kind of had this sense of control. Well, now that is different, and I might be more open to, what do I really want to do with my life? This has been a part of my purpose now. I would not have probably chosen that prior to the loss of Scarlett. Closer and deeper relationships, as I had mentioned, I've kind of been drawn to those relationships that are authentic. I don't spend a lot of energy and time in relationships that are surface, or even with people who couldn't hold my loss in a way that felt supportive. I know that people say things that are hurtful unmeaningly, but there are also people who just wanted to minimize it, and those aren't the relationships that I spend my time with, and have definitely found these relationships that are authentic to be really significant in my life. Appreciation for life. I think I've kind of talked a little bit about that, the preciousness of life, the preciousness of beauty, and even just looking at our own mortality and how, there's only so much that time that we have here. We don't know how much time that is, especially in this time of uncertainty with COVID. So how do we focus on what we appreciate, where we want to put our time and energy? And then a stronger sense of spirituality or religious beliefs. For some people, this is the case. For some people, they really feel like their relationship with their spirituality or their religious beliefs have been shaken. And sometimes they can return to a new understanding. So around the post-traumatic growth, that is one interesting field of research. Let's see, the other things I want to say around this is that when they're looking at this post-traumatic growth research, more than half of people who have been through trauma grow. They feel like their suffering can be the catalyst for positive change. And at some point, and this isn't something that I would recommend anyone push themselves to do, especially in the early stages of grief, but at some point there might be a shift, an opportunity to reflect, adapt your worldview to include the experience and find meaning. And I have seen beautiful things that people have done in honor of their babies. It is really inspiring to me. I believe that growth occurs when we confront the challenges of our new reality in the aftermath of this trauma. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to speak about this today, and welcome any questions, any comments about how you have been coping with your losses. I find that especially in community, sharing those components of what has been helpful is really a beneficial experience. And then if anyone needs to take like a little stretch break or use the restroom before we do the guided meditation, which is next after we check in about questions, feel free to do that too. So any questions, comments? Okay. Oh.
No, I'm just coming on just in case. If you guys have any questions, put them in the chat box or comments. Because sometimes I think after the meditation, right, we're a little bit zoned out,
yes,
relaxed.
People want to just lay there and stay quiet. I want to give people that opportunity. So I will certainly be available for questions at the end, but now is a good time to pause and do that. So thank you, Kylie, for.
Okay, I have just one comment from Hannah. I found the Headspace app to be very helpful. There's a grieving portion of the app that has been very therapeutic. Cool. Thank you for sharing, Hannah.
Yeah, I know sleep was, for me, it was falling asleep and then waking up in the morning and just like waking up to the nightmares. So anything that can be done to be able to get good quality sleep, doing a Headspace app, or just even just breathing mindfully before bed can be a way to help shift into to quality sleep if possible. And I certainly know people who have needed medication as a way of sleeping in the beginning of their losses. So whatever it takes.
Yeah, I mean, just for some more talk about meditation apps, I use Insight Timer,
Okay.
um, which is a free meditation app. But one, I mean, I do different types of meditation, but one thing before bed that helps me is yoga nidra, which is more of a body scan.
Mm-hmm.
But that's helpful to me. I mean, there's so many different types as you were talking. And then you go into these apps and there's a lot of options. But
Yeah,
it's good. It's like check out different things. And
absolutely.
okay, does anyone else have any questions or thoughts? Okay, Hannah. Hi, Hannah. Thanks for participating. She says, I have a question about finding your community. Any recommendations for ways to find support during COVID?
Oh, good question. I mean, RTZ is an amazing resource in terms of community. Um, I'm happy to help with, if you want to reach out, I'll have my email at the end of the presentation. If you want to reach out to me and I can help you find, if I know of any community in your area. I know Facebook groups have been one place where some people have found community. HAND offers peer support, and so there may be other resources in terms of just connecting with at least one other person and maybe expanding community there, because we don't talk about this with just anyone. It is sometimes hard to know who else has experienced a loss. Do you have any
Yeah, and
ideas?
well, I'm just thinking what we have, because everything is virtual right now. So we Return to Zero has a Facebook group. Like if you actually go, and I can put this link it to you. We have on virtual support group programs, and so we're in the middle of a few of them right now, so we don't have a new one yet. But the Facebook group is a place just to like not have to see all the posts of new babies and stuff like that, but to be in a group where other people have experienced a loss. But I will say it's also not um, it's not so much focusing on like the pain of your loss. It's more like how do we find hope and growth and healing through the loss, just kind of more inspirational things to get you through. And then you're in Portland, so we have a directory on our website, and we can look to see if there are maybe like a local support group up there. There may be, like, I think there is. I just need to figure out what their name is, and I can share that with you. And they might be doing virtual support groups or connect you with other lost parents who are in your area.
And because it's October, I think that more of those resources are being shared, hopefully at least on Facebook or Instagram, or somewhere where October 15th is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Day, but this whole month of October is building awareness. So I know that sometimes there's Walk to Remembers through hospitals. I don't have any Portland resources off the top of my head, but I do believe that there are.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay.
Okay,
I don't think so, Shannon.
there we
I'm
go
gonna
then.
hand it back to you.
Thank you. All right. So yes, definitely take what you need in terms of a comfortable position. Some people fall asleep when they first meditate, especially if you're lying down. So just know whatever you need, see if you can be compassionate about your experience, especially if this is a new experience for you. For some people, being in their body, as I had mentioned for myself, it can feel like it stirs up the trauma. So I want to invite you to keep your eyes open if you need, to gaze softly in front of you. If you feel comfortable closing your eyes, feel free to do that. Sometimes that can bring our awareness inward. You can step away and come back. So really listen to what your body, what your heart is needing. And if you can, turn off any distractions, that's usually also really helpful. I noticed that there are some things in the chat, but I can't get to that. Kylie, is there anything I need to answer?
No, I'm just sending some links.
Okay, great. No problem.
You're good.
Okay. And then if you just want to witness your thoughts today and see if you can be in the present to the best of your ability. So I am going to just invite you to find that comfortable position, either gazing softly ahead or gently closing your eyes. And just noticing what's happening in your body right now. Noticing your breath. Noticing any places where you might feel discomfort or any sensations. And as we begin, I want to invite you to set an intention for this time. Maybe it's something that you're ready to let go of. Maybe it's something that you need to bring in to offer more support. And if you don't have anything, that's okay too. Breathing in through your nose, down into your lungs and belly. Letting go, exhaling through your mouth. Just following your breath as you breathe in and out. In through the nose, down into the lungs and belly. Releasing through your mouth. These are called letting go breaths. Just notice what's happening with the mind. Sometimes it's helpful to count the inhale and the exhale to anchor your awareness. Allowing the exhale to be a little longer than the inhale. Breathing in oxygen. releasing tension and holding. Allowing your body to unwind. And we'll do a gentle scan, starting with our head, moving down. Just inviting your brain to shift back into your skull, allowing it to be passive, knowing that there's nothing it needs to do in terms of thinking right now. Just observing the experience. As you release the muscles in your forehead, bringing attention to the tiny muscles around your eyes, relaxing your jaw, letting your tongue rest on your lower palate, breathing all the way in and out. Releasing in your throat, bringing that breath and awareness down your neck and your shoulders, down your arms, past your elbows, your forearms, hands, and fingertips. Releasing tension with your next exhale. Just noticing. Breathing into your heart. Breathing in self-compassion, self-love. Filling up your whole heart. Maybe even imagining a color radiating from your heart outward. If it's difficult to feel compassion for yourself, beginning with someone else that you love dearly, noticing how easy it is to love and hold compassion for others. Knowing that you too deserve that gift, that right for your own self-compassion. Breathing in, breathing out. Letting go of any of the judgment or criticism that may have been uncovered as you breathe into your heart. Each breath a new opportunity to fill your body up with self-compassion, relaxation, and presence. Honoring your experience in your body without needing to change any of it. Just notice and breathe. Feeling the fullness of the breath as you breathe into your lungs. Feel that expansion and contraction. As you breathe all the way down to your belly, Notice what's happening emotionally. Our emotions live in our bodies. And as we breathe in now, we might notice a layer of emotion. I want to welcome you to just be with whatever is here, knowing that our emotions are always changing. So inviting the breath to support whatever intensity you meet. Knowing also that you can always step back out, open your eyes, do whatever you need to take care of yourself. But trusting that you can hold these emotions. Like the waves that come in, the sets of waves that are so intense. Allowing that breath and grounding to bring you beneath the surface, down into the ocean where it is calm. Holding the experience of your loss, your grief, your pain. Allowing it to be with you here. Allowing the love that you have for your baby or your babies to be with you as you breathe in and out. You may want to put a hand on your belly and your other hand on your heart. Breathing that compassion in all the way into your belly. Breathing in love. Permission to explore what's here today. You have around your pain, around your loss. Notice what that might be. Sometimes our wise or intuitive self can help give us messages when we're quiet. It can help us move through the pain and the grief with support. So just noticing what that might be for you. And is there something that you want to say to your child or your children? Is there a way that you can hold this space with breath and awareness that you are not alone in your grief? Recognizing this community, breathing in, breathing out, letting go. And just as you breathed in color to your heart, notice if there's a color or texture, a word or an image that you can breathe into your womb to heal whatever is needed today. Seeing if you can stay with that compassion and love, just as you might so easily hold it for someone else. Recognizing how much you need it for you. Allowing that breath and awareness to move down to your hips, your pelvis, grounding through your tailbone, deep into the earth, through each of your legs, past your knees, your calves and shins, ankles, feet, and toes. Imagining roots growing from your legs and your tailbone, connecting to the earth, connecting to this community of other mothers who've experienced this type of pain and loss, who know on some level your experience. And perhaps there is some connection that reminds you of your experience with your baby, perhaps in nature or some other way that brings that love, that memory into the present moment. For some people, it might be seeing a butterfly or something growing or the breeze blowing. Inviting your heart to be open to this experience. And knowing that the breath is here to support whatever it is that you're needing. Breathing in, breathing out, and releasing anything that is no longer serving you. Reconnecting with this intention that we began with. Taking a few breaths just to notice your experience. And now I want to invite you to surround yourself with a bubble of light. Could be some other image like a cloak or a shield. Something that completely surrounds you from above your head to below your feet. Inside this space is just for you, holding this vulnerability, this cultivation of compassion, this connection to your baby. It's always there. And outside is the rest of the world. So we don't need to let in all of the pain of the world when we're doing our own grieving. Sometimes we just need to be with our experience. Knowing that you can always breathe your way back to this place, this sacred space that you've created to connect to your emotions, your grief, your intention, your love. Noticing your experience in your body as we gently bring our awareness back. Notice any shift from when we began. Take all the time you need before you slowly and gently open your eyes, letting in the light. And if you choose to stay here in this quiet space, feel free to do so. So for those who are wanting to kind of wrap up together, you want to share any part of your experience, any challenges or questions, feel free to do so in the chat.
Thank you, Shannon, for that really nice meditation.
You're welcome. I think as we're waiting, if anyone has anything, I wanted to read something from Annie Lamott about grief. This is from her book, Traveling Mercies, Some Thoughts on Faith. She says, all those years I fell for the great palace lie that grief should be gotten over as quickly as possible and as privately. But what I've discovered since is that the lifelong fear of grief keeps us in a barren, isolated place, and that only grieving can heal grief. The passage of time will lessen the acuteness, but time alone without the direct experience of grief will not heal it. San Francisco is a city in grief. We are a world in grief. And it is at once intolerable and a great opportunity. I'm pretty sure that it is only by experiencing that ocean of sadness in a naked and immediate way that we come to be healed, which is to say, that we come to experience life with a real sense of presence and spaciousness and peace. So I wish that for all of you. Presence and spaciousness and peace in this crazy world we live in.
So we do have a question, and this could get, this is pretty in depth, but before I ask my question is, I'm going to email everyone after this. Can we share that poem over email?
Absolutely.
Like, okay, like you can give it to me and I'll send it out. Thank you. That was beautiful. So Maribel's asking, how do we cultivate or explore a new sense of meaning? So
good question.
That's a big question.
I actually have some notes about that I didn't get to, so I'll share. I think one of the pieces that feels important is writing. If you are inclined to write, I think sometimes that gets past our way that we think the world should be, and is if we can just write about our experiences, what we're exploring, it can be beneficial. So that is one way of finding meaning. I think connecting with other people who you can process this with. It doesn't have to be a therapist. It can be just somebody that you trust is one way of holding that unconditional support and love. I think creativity is also one way that we can create meaning and find our understanding of how we want to integrate this into our lives. So I had mentioned art. I know an amazing woman who has created dance as her form of expression and creativity around her loss. And it is just, she did a little bit of it at one of our retreats, and it was just really powerful. And I do know that there are people who've done some drama skits around loss that have been, I haven't seen them myself, but I've heard some stories about others who have witnessed and related to that experience. I think moving our bodies in whatever way moving our bodies feels right to do is really important. I live where there's smoke all the time now, so that's a little harder to do outside. But I think sometimes when we're doing something that feels good in a way that we're taking care of our bodies, we can kind of, it can shift the way that we're thinking about things. So I think movement and also just taking care of basic needs, sleep and connection and all of that is important. I think sometimes having other people who have been on this road a little bit longer helps us remember that we're not going to drown, that there might be just a lifeline to, okay, if somebody else can get through this, then I might be able to too. So those are a few thoughts. Does anyone else have input?
I mean, I want to add, and this is more to answering a question of like, how do you find meaning from your loss? Mm-hmm. Is that it's very individual, right? Like, so I would say, like, don't necessarily put pressure on yourself to turn your loss into something meaningful and wanting to do it in a very right or very big way. You know, I think that everyone will honor their child in a meaningful way in an individual way. And so just whatever feels right to you. And it may not be immediately. Like for me, I didn't start doing anything till 9 years after my loss, which is a long time. And there's some people doing things immediately. And so I would say, like, try to lift expectations on yourself, and that there isn't necessarily a timeline to follow for that.
Good advice. I know that some parents I've talked to feel that kind of initial experience at the very beginning of their loss of, this has shaken me, and what do I want to be different? So there may be meaning in, how do I honor whatever is kind of awakened in having had this experience that I might not always have given myself the opportunity to take a risk to do, if that's professional or personal or just the way that life is unfolding. So yeah, I agree. No pressure to create meaning. There's a book called Finding Meaning that is really wonderful. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard some interviews with the author, and his name is escaping me at the moment.
Yeah, it's David Kessler.
Thank you. Yes. So yeah, the whole grief process, the finding meaning piece is wherever you are. It's not a goal or a piece of pressure. Good question. Thanks, Maribel.
Are there any other questions or thoughts? Maybe you can share things that have been helpful to you. Okay, well, I'm guessing that everybody is done. And oh, Mary Bell's sharing, yeah, just some things that have been helpful to her are gardening, painting rocks, and Tai Chi.
Nice. Thank you.
Very nice.
And I would encourage everyone to be really gentle with yourself today, that this might have stirred up some feelings that you might want to just be extra kind to yourself. If you need to go to bed earlier tonight or even take a rest, that's okay. Grieving is tiring work.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up. Shannon, thank you so much for being here and holding space for everyone as we learn about mindfulness, because it can seem like a big word, right? But it's but looking deeper at it and kind of untangling what that means, and for offering that beautiful meditation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll include Shannon's email and website on the email that I send out to everyone as well. So thank you, everyone, whether you're joining us live or joining us via recording. Just our hearts go out to you, and we're glad that you're here sharing this space with us. Okay, have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.